Welcome to the Empower and Perspective Podcast. I am your host, Dwayne, and today we're going to be talking about the nuances of leadership. Now, you know, leadership is one of my favorite topics, but today we're going to talk about it from a different perspective. We're going to look at the differences between military leadership and leadership in the civilian sector, and more specifically, we're going to talk about in the contracting realm. And to usher this discussion today is my good friend, Brian Parks. You might hear me refer to him as Big Chief, but that's all right. Same thing. The guy's like 6'5", man, about a good 250. I mean, he should be in the NFL someplace. But nonetheless, Brian, welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Dwayne, thank you for having me, man. First of all, let me commend you on this incredible podcast, man. I mean, this is a great platform for, military guys, just people in general that have something to say. So I appreciate you for having me on. It's very diverse. You're very honest on here, and you give a voice to those that are experienced, man. So I appreciate that. I'm good.
Well, man, I appreciate you saying that, brother. And I'll tell you the truth, man, that's really what I was going for when I started this thing. I just know that there's a lot of wonderful people out there like yourself that are just, wealth of knowledge and just very intelligent and, have some stuff that can actually, that you can actually say that can help somebody who's coming behind us. And who knows, man, maybe even help somebody who's, been retired for a few years now and just kind of struggling with that transition, man. So, with that being said, man, let's just kind of dive into this conversation because, I know you got some stuff on your chest you want to get off, man. So I want to hear it. So just kind of give us your journey. In fact, let's back up. Introduce yourself to the people. Let them know who Big Chief really is. And just kind of usher us into this thing real quick.
Yeah, so like you said, I am Brian Parks. I spent 28 years, 11 days in the United States Army. I know that because my DD-214 says that. But I'm a retired warrant officer, CW4. I traversed all the way from E1 to E7. Then I changed over to be a warrant officer, W1 to W4. So currently, I am a contractor for the DOD, and I went straight from active duty to contracting. I didn't have a break. I didn't have a chance to gain 50 pounds because I went straight from military to contracting. But, I mentioned my time in the Army and all the things I went through because I've been able to see a real change from the time I was an E1, a private, had no say in anything, to when I was a W4 and I'm a leader and I get to have input. I'm right next to the boss. I had the boss's ear. So that scope of leadership that I've seen, and now that the things I've seen in the contracting world, like you said, I got the stuff on my mind.
There you go. And trust me when I tell you, when he says that he was sitting like right next to the boss, I mean, he would be the one to talk. And it didn't matter who else was in the room. Like, he had the floor, and what he said was golden. So he is not exaggerating with that. We spent some time together in Shaw Air Force Base, and I'm telling you, when he showed up, he was the man. So, he kind of painted his picture, his military transition from E1 to, CW4. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that you've seen in between there. And now transitioning into the civilian sector, being a contractor and being a leader within the contracting realm, kind of help us to understand this journey, Brian. Like, when you look at military leadership, you look at civilian leadership, like what brings us to the point to have this discussion?
Well, as I said earlier, being the led allows you to see different types of leadership styles. And then when you are the leader, when you get to those positions, you get to kind of pick and choose what leadership style works for you. I've seen some leadership styles that work very well for everyone. And I've seen some leadership styles that don't work so well for everyone. The Army, just like any kind of large corporation, is made up of people. And sometimes leaders forget that their best capital is the human capital. And if you don't lead that the right way or the appropriate way, you're just not going to have the best results. So I've been able to see, from a military standpoint, I've been able to see some really good examples and some really bad examples. But I take all of those examples in because they allowed me to be the type of leader that I was, which was kind of a hybrid of leadership styles. Because I believe that just like and I know you love football, just like a football team, you have to lead everybody fair, but you can't lead everybody the same. I know they won. But you have to treat everyone fair, but sometimes you just can't lead everyone the same.
Absolutely.
And so I think that having those experiences from the military and then getting into the contracting world, it's very similar, but we're going to get into some of those similarities and differences. I know.
I like it. I like it a lot. Just listening to you explain that, right? Explain. It reminded me a lot of myself. Brian's background is field artillery, just like mine was. And so when when you see people start talking with the knife hand and things of that nature, that was me. Like I was 10 and 2. Like when I said do something, my soldiers, it was funny. They used to call it 0 to 60, and it was how you can go from being calm 1 minute to just being, you get to that peak just that fast. And it was interesting because that transition for me, I found it to be slightly difficult. Like you, when I retired, I went I got my DD-214 one day, and next thing you know, I'm on the road to Oklahoma. So I ended up at Fort Sill working out there. And it was very interesting because I found myself having to pull. I found myself having to pull back. Going to a TRADOC installation, understanding who you were in the Army and what your standard was, things of that nature, and then seeing other stuff transpire. It's like you wanted to say something, you wanted to, go help, but that's not who you are anymore. You know what I'm saying? So that was the hardest thing. And I remember one particular incident when we were working together right there on Fort Gordon. There was a situation, and I felt it rising up in me. I had to I think you know the situation I'm talking about. I felt it rising up, and I had to catch myself because before I knew it, I started walking closer to the individual, and I came to myself real quick because it was just one of those things, and that kind of goes back to what you're talking about. The big difference between being the leader in the Army and being the leader in the civilian sector. But, let's be honest. In the civilian sector, they can walk off the job. And so, in the Army, you're under contracts. That's a little different, but you're absolutely right. When it comes down to leading people, people are people, regardless of whether they wear a uniform or whether they wear a pair of slacks and a button-down shirt. They're still people. And at the end of the day, you want to put people in positions so that they can actually excel and, be their best within the scope of their responsibilities. And you get the maximum efficiency out of the person. Not just because they signed a contract or they agreed to take the job, but because they enjoy coming to work, they enjoy who they work with, and they enjoy the leaders because their leaders care about them. So I started tapping into it a little bit, so I had to pull it back because I know you want to get into it. So let's compare and contrast military and civilian leadership.
Well, like you said, you kind of led into it, which is a great lead-in because I know you're an instructor, so I know you have the good lead-in. But one of the first things I said as far as how they compare is that, like I said earlier, they're all made of people. And people come with things, like you said, people come with issues and feelings and attitudes, and quite honestly, they come with, how do I make my money?
Yeah.
In the military, of course, our mission is the number one thing when you join the military. And that mission is to defend the nation, and I understand all that. But at the end of the day, I have never seen a soldier one time turn down his paycheck.
Good point.
And there are some soldiers that specifically are there for that. Now, they won't tell you that out in public. They're going to take their oath. They're going to do what they want to do. But, as a warrant officer, when I used to get NCOs that wanted to become warrant officer, I would ask them one question: why do you want to become a warrant officer? And they'd give me the book answer. I want to be the technical expert for the Army and all that rah-rah stuff. That's a great answer. Then I would say, stop. I'm not that person. Please tell me why you really want to do it. I mean, if you want to have a better retirement in the end of your service, then say that. If you want to be the guy that stands in his pocket, doesn't come PT formation, say that too. But be honest about it. And 95% of the time, the soldier, the NCO would say, I want to have a better life for my family. So in understanding that is very similar in the contracting world.
Yeah. Because
in the contracting world, people come to work these contracts because they want to make a living for their family. Now, most of the time, those salaries are pretty good. So if I want to have this job where I'm making X amount of money, I have to be able to do certain things. As a leader, once you receive them, you have to be able to recognize that. Because often, coming from a military background, I believe I have some kind of hold over you because you have this military contract. And most of the time it's associated with, if you leave, you're going to go AWOL, we're going to send you to jail.
Right.
But you don't have that hold over your employees or your subordinates in the contracting world. Like you said, they can just leave and nothing's going to happen to them. And sometimes they won't even blink an eye. They will just leave because a better opportunity has arrived. Now, as a leader, you hope that they would give you a heads up and say, hey, Brian, I found a gig over here at Savannah. I got to leave. Okay. But they don't have to give you that. So, you try to build these relationships, and I'm going to get to really, a deep part about relationships. But, when it comes to you understanding people and how they work and what leadership really is, we understand it because we lived it in the Army, but it's really just about getting your workforce to do the work they said they were going to do and be happy about it. And there's a whole bunch of other definitions you can put in there, but bottom line is I want you to be happy to come to work because in the end, I want whatever we're producing to get done, and I want the customer to be happy, and I want the company to be happy.
That's right. I love it.
But if we're talking about the differences, one of the main ones was just that. They can just leave. They don't have to give you any kind of heads up or any kind of notice. In some states they do, but most states they don't.
Right.
And the other thing I found, which was different, was if you do want to get rid of them as a leader, how do you do it? In the military, it's very laid out how you discipline a person. Right. And you say, okay, there's the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I know if I counsel you, I give you these expectations. We talk about these counsels quarterly. There's a whole process that you understand and they drill it into you from young soldier, young NCO, young officer, senior officer. They tell you exactly how to do that. When you become a civilian contractor, to me, there's no training of how to get rid of an employee.
Right.
There's an employee handbook and there's a company handbook, and depending on what size of the company, they talk to HR, talk to EEO, you're like, okay, how do I get this done? And there's no real clear layout of how you do it. For each company it's different, I get it. But it's just not laid out like it was for you in the military. So just like you had an experience of, this person is just really not the right person for this job, but how do I document that? Right. And then where do I receive the documentation from? If I'm a leader and I have a subordinate leader, let's say a site lead, okay, site lead, tell me what this person is doing or not doing. Is it coming from the company side or is it coming from the government? There's just a whole bunch of layered steps that you really don't know until you just live it. And once you live it a couple of times, you kind of make that on your own. But that's starkly different from the military, which shows you exactly how to do that.
Absolutely, man. That was good. That was really good. And I've had some significant experiences with everything you just said. Like literally, like one for me, if I was to, so when I started looking at the contrast and the comparison of contrast between the two, right? First, I would look at the contrast first. Because for me, I think that's easier. Like when you hire a person on the civilian side, you're looking at their resume, you're screening their resume, see if they got the qualifications. And once you understand that the qualifications of what you're looking for based upon the job description, now let's talk to this person, let's interview them. And we're going to give them some situational questions just to see how they respond. We don't need them to answer the questions perfectly. We just need to see how they respond under pressure, see some of the answers that they give us, and most importantly, are they going to be a good fit for us? So we're interviewing them, and as an employee, they should be interviewing us as well. So they should come to the interview with questions to ask. On the other side of the fence, there is no interview. Are you physically capable? Go to MEPS. All right, that's it. So there is really we can call it an interview per se, and I think the Air Force has more of an interview process that may sound similar to that. But I think it's a little bit more reduced than what we do in the civilian sector. But then by that same token, you still got to go to MEPS. You still got to, you get 10 jobs, I think, in the Air Force to select from. In the Army, you get 3. That's it. We're 3. And then chances are it might be the lowest 3, whatever that looks like, right? And then once you get in the Army, you're right. There is a clear, defined structure of the leadership. right? And not only is there a clear defined structure of leadership, you also factor in different counselings, you factor in promotions and all this other stuff that goes in there. So you become more intimately, based upon the structure now, you become more intimately involved. In the civilian sector, you become more intimately involved when you reach that level of maturity as a leader. If you're just that type of leader that wants everybody to come to work and do their job, then good, get to work. But if you are that, what we tend to call mature leader, yeah, you want to go around and talk to your people, sense the organization, the climate in the organization. I want to get to know my people. They're married, they're single, you have kids. What's your intrinsic motivational value, right? And that kind of gets back to on the other side, the Army, purpose, direction, and motivation. Now I understand what your intrinsic value, I have a better understanding of how to motivate you. So what I will also add is that even in the military, because it was just lockstep, right? You know what you're doing, you know what you got to do. Every month you got to co-op, you got to counsel. Every quarter you got to counsel NCOs. Every year you got to make sure that you do evaluation reports, all that stuff. Similar in the military, similar in the civilian sector as well. Not so much as every month, but of course we got to do performance goals, we got to do performance measures, and then we do performance evaluations. Very similar. I would say that, I don't know, I can't tell you when it happened for me. I think right around staff sergeant. I don't know, something happened with me when it came to leadership. I started becoming more involved with it. Like I started caring about being a leader. And at that point, it seemed like once that happened, I decided I wanted to groom soldiers. Yeah, sure. You had the other part, lockstep part, like make sure you APFT, weapons qual, APFT, weapons qual. You do those things, you're golden. But then it got more intense. Like, how much college you got? You need to go to school. What's your plan for them? Like, you start getting more involved with the people and understanding what they want. Just like you were saying, for those people who came to you and want to go to warrant officer school, why do you want to be a warrant? Because that helps you to understand their intrinsic motivation. Now that I got that, now let me help you get in that direction. So when I started looking at military versus civilian, I started looking at things like that. Yeah, there's some huge differences. Man, it's huge. But then on the other side, there are some similarities in there. And I think based upon, in our footprint, a lot of us are prior military. So, we understand those things and we work well together. So, man, that was great, man. And I like the fact that you brought all that stuff to the table. And trust me, we can have this conversation here for the next 45 minutes. You know what I'm saying? But I just like the fact that you brought that into the table, because these are the struggles. And again, I kind of mentioned it previously, going from a more structured, standardized leadership style to a more, and I don't want to use the term laissez-faire, but depending upon the leader, it can seem like a laissez-faire leadership style, to where most people are just on autopilot. They don't get a lot of instruction. They don't get a lot of direction. And most importantly, they don't get a lot of corporate information that being funneled through. So they're just there. So man, that's interesting.
And I want to say one more point here too.
Yeah.
And this is going to step on some toes, and that's okay because I wear size 13, 14, so it's going to be all right. But all the people, to me, just like in the military, everyone's not meant to be a leader. It seems as though if you're in a position of leadership, you should be there, but sometimes that's not true.
Yeah.
Some people just aren't good leaders, and they're not meant to be. No matter how you train them, no matter what pamphlets you give them, policies you give them, they're just not meant to be there. So sometimes you have to look at, okay, like I said before, there are very good leaders. So I took examples of very good leadership. I also took examples of very bad leadership, or a person that couldn't lead you down the street to 7-Eleven. But they're in that position. So what do you do?
Yeah.
In the military, you press on and you try to find someone in that chain of command that you can kind of go to, maybe as a mentor, or at least someone that you can say, hey, sorry, I don't think this is right, or hey, chief, or sir, I don't think this is right. Can you help me out? Because X leader or X person in a position of leadership is really not giving me what I need, what I can understand. And on that point, I want to go back to something you said, which is very interesting. Around staff sergeant, you tried to kind of figure out, okay, what's happening with me?
Mm-hmm.
And almost the same thing happened to me as well. I got to staff sergeant and I kind of figured out that I'm really going from a supervisor to a leader, a manager of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I figured out, because when you're E5, I was a corporal too, God bless me. I was corporal, and then I was a sergeant E5. I was just in a supervisor role. Okay,
Right.
the soldiers do this, do that. Like you said, very lockstep. But when I got to staff sergeant, I started to figure out that, you know what, I probably should be concerned with who these people are,
Absolutely.
as opposed to what I need them to do.
Yeah.
So once I figured that out too, I said, oh, okay. That's why my leadership is changing.
Yeah.
Because I've kind of transitioned out of just supervisor role to now I am a manager / leader of these people.
Yeah.
And I have to make these people fit into the overall unit.
Yeah.
But like I said, understanding that some people are not very good leaders, and that you have to understand where to go and how to compensate for that sometimes. And so in the contracting world, I've found that, it's an old adage, but some people really live by it. And it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the people that know people say, hey, listen, I'm going to put you in this leadership position. An example of that is I was on another contract before this one, and they had people in position that had never been in the military. And they're on the DOD contract.
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't mean you can't do it.
Right.
But there are some, as we said in this discussion, some nuances
Right.
of understanding how to lead in that environment.
Yeah.
You're a person that's never been in the military, you're in the corporate sector, you were at a certain level in that corporate, so they said, okay, you got to be able to do that here.
Mm-hmm.
That's not necessarily true.
Right.
Because when you look at the people that you are leading, these people have literally hundreds of years of experience.
Right.
And they're trying to help you in your leadership position by letting you know, hey, you probably shouldn't do it this way.
Right.
This probably is a better way to get our point across, or to individually understand people.
Yeah.
This guy was a sergeant major when he was in the Army. He served 30 plus years. This is not the guy that you want to go one-on-one with about policy.
Yeah.
Because he's probably going to eat you up.
Right.
This person was a warrant officer for 30 years. This is not the person you want to go to about subject matter expertise.
Right.
Right. And so, as we said at the beginning of the conversation, you have to lead these people different.
Yeah.
Everyone can't be led the same way. Everyone must be treated with respect
There you
and
go.
fairly. But that doesn't mean I can lead the person that was a sergeant major for 30 years the same I could lead a person that was an intel analyst for 4 years.
Yeah.
It's just a different capacity for understanding.
Yeah.
So you got to kind of look at that too. But I know some people are going to be mad at me when I say that, but